back to episode 12 of this GS750 Restoration. Thanks for watching. If you're liking this series, please press subscribe below. In this episode, we'll be getting all the frame and parts back from the powder coater. See how that came out. Finish off preparing the engine, polishing and painting, etc. And then get the engine back into the frame. And then start putting the bike back together, which is the fun part. So let's get on with episode 12. So we've finally got all the bits and pieces back from sandblasting and powder coating, and as usual, Vinny from KCB Blast and Coat has done a fantastic job. He's been doing this for like 20 years and really knows his stuff. He's done a great job of keeping all the powder out of the thread holes and bearing holes, etc. And has done like a satin black finish on this. So he did my katana a few years ago, so luckily he's still in the same business and still doing a great job. So here's all the other bits and pieces that I got done. So swing arm, center stand, side stand, triple clamps, battery box, brake calipers, engine mounts, etc. So yeah, very happy with that. So once we get the engine back in the frame, we can really start putting this back together. So my original plan for the engine was to polish it all up, the whole engine. That's proving to be difficult. Trying to get the surface looking good and consistent across the whole motor, especially the fins, they're very difficult. So looking at some other restoration projects, and also based on what was originally done on the engine, I've decided that most of the engine will be painted in an aluminium engine enamel. So around the back here, probably the fins, and then I will polish things like the side cover there, the rocker cover, the points cover, this side cover. I've already done a bit of polishing on these side covers and sprayed a clear enamel over that little panel, because you need to try and stop it from oxidizing after you've done it. So that's the plan. So plan today is to give it a rub down with Scotch-Brite, mask it all up, and then spray this what's it, aluminium, I think, engine enamel over most of the engine, and then once that's fully dried, then continue polishing the external bits. So here's the engine masked up as good as possible. So keeping some of this stuff as polished and blocking off obvious things like spark plug holes, etc. So let's see how we go with this spray job. Here's the motor after 3 coats of aluminium engine enamel and then 1 coat of clear over the top. Looking quite good. And the next step is to just polish these pieces that are going to be polished, and then put a layer of clear over the top, and then a few little bits and pieces, and then we're ready to put the engine back in the frame. Okay, so finished polishing and clear coating the engine now. I mean, I do have the emblems for the side of this motor, but I'll put them on later. I mean, I could have done more polishing, but I want to get this bike back together, and not that anal about getting it to a mirror finish. Cleaned the rocker cover and gave that a clear coat. Decided to paint the oil filter cover rather than try and polish that up. It's a bit of a weird shape. You'll notice I also changed all of the screws for Allen keys. So I've got a kit for stainless steel Allen screws off eBay. Reasonable sort of job on this side. And just clear coated the chain tensioner, and then also polished and clear coated this side cover here, which will go on later. So using my new buffing wheel that I got from eBay, mounted on the end of my frame for my drop saw, so it's nice and solid. So the next step is to winch this motor up, take it off this stand, lay it on its side and sort of chock it up so that it's nice and solid, and then with a series of straps then lower the frame down onto it, and then start bolting the engine back into the frame. So let's try that. So the engine is now off the stand and sitting on this little trolley. The next step will be to put it onto its side, just chock it up so it's nice and solid, and sort of, you know, parallel to the ground, etc. And then I plan to then lower the frame over the top. I'll put some protection around the frame so we don't scratch it, but theoretically we should be able to maneuver that fairly easily over the engine, do up the engine bolt mounts, and then stand the frame up. That's the theory anyway. Let's see. So I've now chocked the motor up so it's sitting pretty well straight up and down, and the next thing will be to use the hooks up here, maybe put another hook in, and then slowly lower the frame over it, and then start putting the engine mount bolts in. So I got the frame hanging from a few straps, the engine over there on its trolley, and I've put some bubble wrap around the frame to try and stop any scratching happening while I maneuver things into position. So let's give it a try. So I've got the engine under there now, just going to slowly start lowering it down into position, and hopefully it'll just slip nicely into place. Well, that was really simple actually, certainly much easier than getting the frame off the motor before. So it's into position, and already started putting some of the engine mounts, bolt in down there, got that bolt in, putting these ones on, so put as many of those on as I can before I stand the thing up. Most of the engine mounts are all in now, not tightened up yet. I think I'll tighten them up when it's sitting on its weight, but now we just need to stand it up and put it on the trolley, and I can move it back into the garage. So back now upright on a trolley so that I can move it around easily. Next step is probably swing arm and back end, back wheel, and then triple clamps, forks, front wheel, get it up on its wheels. But yeah, good progress today. So these are the original rear shock absorbers on the GS750. I have them back on the bike temporarily. They looked in pretty good condition. I pulled them apart to give them a good clean, using this method I found on YouTube, where you put a screwdriver through the bottom hole, using a couple of turnbuckles and some hooks. You hook them onto the top of the spring as close to the top as possible, and then just wind them up, and then you can actually disassemble the shocks. Once I did that, and then checked the actual shock absorber itself, I found that it was virtually non-existent. The first sort of 30 or 40 millimeters, there was no resistance at all. So I have found some shocks online which are pretty close to the originals, although they do have a chrome shroud that goes about halfway down the shock. So I have contacted the company, and looks like I can probably remove that by doing a similar sort of thing, pulling it apart, taking that shroud off, so that it should look, pretty close to the original shock absorbers. That should be arriving in the next day or two. We'll see how that goes. So one of the other things I've done is to replace the steering head bearings with aftermarket tapered bearings. This bike originally came out with just standard roller bearings, and the tapered bearings make it a lot more solid. So yes, the top and bottom bearings have been replaced, adjusted reasonably. I think the idea is to ride it for a while and then readjust those, and then just started sort of putting things back together with sometimes new stainless steel bolts where I can, just to make it look as new as possible. The end caps on this bike were, these are the original ones, which are in really good condition. There were 4 of the original screws, and then I had to go and get some stainless steel screws from my local supplier. But yeah, they've sort of finished off the end of the motor pretty nicely, and the chrome on those is in really good condition. So that's it for episode 12 of this GS750 restoration. Hope you're enjoying the series, and thanks for watching. Making good progress now. Got some things on order, exhaust systems and rear shock absorbers. Concentrating on the back wheel at the moment. There's a spoke missing, which having trouble trying to source that rather than buying a whole spoke set. Yeah, good progress being made, and it's starting to take shape and starting to look like a nice bike in the end. So see you in episode 13.